everyone. My name is Emily, and today I'll be talking a little bit about my ancestry. So first, just before we get started really quick, just want to give a quick content warning. There will be mentions of genocide, specifically the Holocaust, and violence in general. So um, yeah, just letting you know. All right, so first I'll just start off with my family tree in general, so you know kind of who I interviewed and what we're talking about. So I'm not really in contact with my dad's side of the family, so I talk to my mom's side, specifically my grandma. Her name is Tina. If you could see her, she's kind of in the middle of the tree on the left. Um, and I spoke to her about her experience, but I also really spoke to her about her parents, Shirley and Boris, my great grandparents. I was very close with them while they were alive. They recently passed away, but I thought they would be a good story to go off of. Okay, so the culture I'm going over is Jewish culture. So I'll first start with some history of Jewish culture in Europe in the 1920s, 30s. That's when Shirley and Boris were growing up. So they were both from the same small town in Poland. As you can see, there's a map over here. So it's considered current day Belarus, but back in the day it was Poland. Um, but they never considered themselves Polish due to the discrimination they faced. So every time I would kind of ask my grandparents, especially my great grandparents, like, what kind of Polish traditions do you have? She would always shut me down and say, we're not Polish, we're Jewish. So while they were there, it was right before the Holocaust. So they were experiencing a lot of anti-Semitism, um, were called a lot of names, were intimidated by surrounding Polish people. So really a lot of Jewish people kept in two small towns. So they were in a little town called Grodno, which was mostly Jewish people. So Shirley and Boris lived different lives, but they were both pretty good ones. Shirley lived in a large house, and she lived what she described as like an upper middle class lifestyle. She went to private school, and she had many belongings because her father, my great great grandfather, was a very successful tailor. Boris, on the other hand, lived on a farm and worked with his family, so more modest beginnings. But like I said, they began experiencing more and more anti-Semitism as years went on before they were eventually taken by the Nazis. So then we come to the Holocaust. So Shirley and Boris were unfortunately both taken to labor camps. Um, we're all aware of the atrocities that took place during the Holocaust, and they were no exception. So Boris unbelievably was able to survive by telling the Nazis that he was 10 years younger than he was and showed them that he was a valuable worker. So that was a big thing. The Nazis would really only keep people alive if they proved they were valuable in some certain way. So he showed them that he was a strong young man that could do labor for them. Shirley also did something similar. They kind of asked her and the people who were with her what their skills were, and she mentioned that she could sew. She's a seamstress, and they needed that. So she worked making clothes for German soldiers and building weapons for the Nazi Party. However, eventually they were both sent to Auschwitz. As we know, that was one of the concentration camps where one of that were one of the most deadly, like most many Jews were killed there. And what they did is they tattooed numbers on all the Jewish people's arms to dehumanize them, and they would call names when they were ready to execute them. So on the left here, that's actually my grandma Shirley's number. That's a tattoo. It's real. Um, yeah, it's always kind of difficult to look at. Um, yeah, this just I know we're all aware of the atrocities, but she mentioned this, so it's important to say. So Shirley was forced to clean dead bodies from the gas chambers and from the fires, and she actually had to clean out her own family. Um, yeah, so really horrible stuff. But before Shirley and Boris were called to be killed, they were liberated. But they did both lose their whole families. So then we come to immigration to America. So Boris and Shirley met each other in a liberation camp. They recognized each other as being from the same town, and they got married. Now, Shirley described to me it was really important that she married someone that she knew beforehand because she felt that she couldn't trust anyone, understandably. So people really grouped together with people they knew before. Jewish people needed sponsors from America in order to migrate. So thankfully, Shirley had an uncle that was able to sponsor them, and she very proudly says that they were on the first boat that came to America. So I will let her speak for herself. This is an old video I took, asking her to tell her story.
and he got in touch with my uncle, and he came over to me. Isn't that a miracle? Otherwise, I wouldn't be. I came here on the first boat. I remember when we came closer to America, from far we saw Statue of Liberty, the Statue of Liberty. And what we went through when the Germans came in, they used to hit, they used to kill. You know, you're afraid to go in the street when they came in. They hated Jewish people. Yeah. They killed 6 million Jews.
That was just her talking a little bit about her experience. She often talked about how wonderful it was to see the Statue of Liberty and finally feel that she could be free and not have to fear for her life anymore.
And
all right, so some challenges and successes. So I kind of pair them together to kind of show the challenges and how they kind of overcame those challenges. So Boris and Shirley spoke no English, and they were treated very poorly due to that, as is a lot of immigrants' experiences. People kind of assumed, from my grandma's words, that they were dumb for not knowing English. So Shirley kind of took things into her own hands, and she took night classes to learn English, and Boris ended up picking it up over time, but he focused more on physical tasks, as we'll see in the next point. So it was difficult to be hired due to being Jewish and an immigrant. There was a lot of bias still against both of these identities. And like I said, they didn't speak English. So Boris was really smart and would stand in front of butcher shops. They would have these big windows where they would show them taking apart the animals, and he would watch them work for hours and hours until he learned the skill. Now, the licensing test for a butcher is a practical skill. It's not a written or a spoken one. So he was able to get his license and was hired. And Shirley worked in a clothing factory. I mean, under horrible, horrible conditions, but they really wanted to save up money to get out of their living situation, which brings me back to another challenge. They were brought to tenement houses. These were basically abandoned apartment buildings that a lot of immigrants were sent to. So they were living with a few other families in a very small space. It was cramped, dirty, falling apart, dangerous. So they really wanted to get out of there. So they saved up all of their money from working to rent a new place. Another challenge, they knew almost no one coming to America. They had a few family members, but unfortunately, the family members didn't always treat them the nicest. But they were able to connect with other survivors and made friends with Americans. And then that brings me to culture and values. So firstly, what was passed on to me from the Jewish tradition is family and tradition. So I was taught to always value my family and to stay in contact. My grandma Shirley would say over and over again, we lost all of our family. I created a new one. It's the most beautiful thing I did. Please, love each other, stay in contact. So I really value that. I recently got in contact with a great uncle of mine who I did not know, so I will be meeting him soon. And that's really exciting to me. It's also important that traditions are passed on from generation to generation. For example, holidays like Hanukkah, food, latkes. I'll show you a little bit more in the next slide about that. But for me and my family, culture was emphasized as opposed to religion. My great-grandparents really struggled with their faith during the Holocaust. They just couldn't believe that such atrocities could occur. So religion really wasn't emphasized, but culture was. So I will show you in the next slide kind of some of those cultural. Oh, well, actually, I'll show you this video first of my grandma.
We went through a lot, but thank God that I got married to my husband, and we made a family here. Here is I have 5 great grandchildren, but nobody from my friends. A lot of friends are gone already a long time. Came to America, but she is my favorite. Emily, there is did you see the picture?
Yeah, we could show
it. Take a look at the picture there.
She always shows the pictures, all the ages. And then she said her favorite is prom from last year. Yeah, so as you can see, family was very important for her, and she's very proud of her family. Okay, yeah, so just a few traditions of the Jewish culture. So on the top left here, we have something called a huppah. So that is a canopy that stands over the married couple, representing the 4 walls of their new marital home, love and success and good fortune. So I'm actually getting married this summer, and I will be having a huppah. So that's something that is a tradition of ours. Top right is latkes. So this is part of the Jewish cuisine, often eating during Hanukkah and Passover. It's basically fried potatoes. We often eat them with sour cream or jam. Delicious. Highly recommend. Bottom left is an example of a Seder plate during Passover. So there are certain foods we eat during this time and a special plate and prayers we say. So even though we're not religious, we still follow this tradition. And then bottom right is just classic game of dreidel, and the reward we get is called gelt, which is like chocolate coins that you get for winning. So we still do these every year. I'm really going to pass it down to my children if I have them. My grandma Tina, Shirley's daughter, has been saving a big trunk of things for me since I was born to be the next person to kind of take the mantle of hosting all the holidays. So it means a lot to me. And then quickly, this is my family. From a long time ago, I'm in the top right over here as a baby, but my great grandparents are all the way on the left, great grandma Shirley and great grandpa Boris, and our whole extended family on that side. So quite small, as you can see. All right, so some more kind of culture and values and things that were passed down. So guardedness, sacrifice, and education were all passed down, intentionally or not. So Stoicism was really the norm in my family until recently. Despite everything my great grandparents went to, they kept it very close to the chest. However, like everyone else with intergenerational trauma, my family was not unscathed. There's a lot of mental illness in my family, which I was unaware of until I went through my own struggles. And um, since then, I've kind of opened the floodgates and been open about mental health within our family. So while Stoicism was the norm in my family, I think, at least for me, it's not a value I want to bring on anymore or pass on. Another thing that I'm going to alter a bit is sacrifice. So parents are really expected to sacrifice everything for their children. And, every parent makes sacrifices, but I kind of mean like like it was the norm to go without clothing or give all of your birthday money to your children, and this was kind of expected. And then as a result, a lot of the times this is referred to as Jewish guilt. The parents would kind of tell the kids, look at all the sacrifices I did for you. And we're expected to kind of continue that cycle over and over again. While I do think sacrifice is a part of being a parent and it's important, I think there has to be a balance between sacrifice and taking care of oneself. And I don't think guilt has a place in that. So I'm definitely going to be adjusting that moving forward. Something else, though, is education is valued deeply in Jewish culture. It is at least expected in my family for the children to pursue higher education. I have a different outlook now. I think people seek different forms or levels of education for a whole lot of different reasons, and there's many ways to be successful and many ways to have a full life. So while I do value education, I think there's a lot of different ways to achieve that. So I don't subscribe to that anymore either. How did my culture affect my worldview, social justice, human rights, immigration, and multiculturalism views on these things? So I was kind of taught from a young age to be aware of what was happening in the world. My grandparents would always say it happened once, it could happen again. Be aware of what's going on. Don't think it can't happen to you. It happened to our family. So I've kind of had a somewhat pessimistic worldview, kind of always on edge, looking out for something going wrong. However, I'm very passionate about human rights. Hearing all of those stories about how my grandparents were deprived of their rights made me feel passionate to protect other people's. I'm very supportive of immigration because I think that if a country is not giving a person what they need or actively harming them, I think it is every person's right to seek a better life. Um, I also value multiculturalism. I've seen the effect of assimilation, at least in my family. My great grandparents spoke fluent Yiddish and Russian and Polish, and they only taught my grandma English because they wanted her to fit in. But now that's something that's lost in my family. So I think there can be a combination of many different cultures and values, and I think that's a beautiful thing. And kind of a current like day-to-day effect I kind of wanted to discuss is like, despite being Jewish, I am against Israel's actions due to my views on social justice. So it's often assumed that I feel one way when I actually feel another because of my Jewish culture. I am passionate about human rights and am anti-genocide. So I wanted to bring that up. And then how will it affect me practicing with immigrant clients? So knowing my grandparents' story, I feel I am more empathetic to the struggles of immigration. And being Jewish, I have experienced some prejudice myself, some anti-Semitism, but I want to make it clear that I am still a white person and have a lot of privilege that comes with that. So my experiences are minute compared to people of color. Um, so I can always be culturally humble and keep that in mind and try to lift up people who maybe may not have that white privilege. I also know to connect clients to appropriate resources. For example, people who come not maybe knowing English, connecting them with translators or classes if they want, or with people who know their language. And from textbook and learning, I know to use appropriate approaches like strength-based, ecological, and trauma-informed. And here are my references. Thanks so much, everyone.